Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jason Broadwater. I'm our Assistant Dean in the McIntyre College of Liberal Arts at Duquesne University. I want to welcome you to our Leaders in Liberal Arts Alumni webinar series. You'll notice a few changes since the last time that we met in January. We're trying a new format today, obviously, as you can see, as evidenced by a panel discussion, a new room, a different backdrop, that sort of thing. So hopefully it works. We've also added a new name to the webinar series. Like I said, it is now known as the Leaders in Liberal Arts webinar series. And today we're having a conversation, relations across races. We have some wonderful panelists with us today. It's my pleasure to introduce them this time. To my right, we have Charquinta McCray. She's a graduate student here at Duquesne University in Social and Public Policy. She earned her bachelor's degree from Duquesne in political science in 2013, and she's a native of Newport News. Got it right? Newport News, Virginia. So, Charquinta, welcome. We have Dr. Moni McIntyre. She is an assistant professor in the Graduate Center for Social and Public Policy here at Duquesne. She earned her PhD from the University of St. Michael's College in Toronto, Canada. And she's the author of Social Ethics and the Return to Cosmology, a study of Gibson Winter. She's also heavily involved in the Pittsburgh community and a pastor of a local church in Homewood.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good deal. Got it right. And finally, Dr. Rahmon Hart, a college administrator who's currently serving as the director of the Office of Multicultural Affairs here at Duquesne. His primary responsibilities include implementing programs and services that help to develop, retain, and graduate college students of culturally diverse backgrounds. Dr. Hart is a Pittsburgh native and a graduate of the Pittsburgh Public Schools, Perry Traditional Academy. He earned his Bachelor of Science degree in Kinesiology and a Master of Arts degree in College Administration at Slippery Rock University. After serving in a broad range of leadership roles at Slippery Rock, Illinois State University, Case Western Reserve University, Carnegie Mellon, and Duquesne, he earned his doctorate in educational leadership from Duquesne University. A warm welcome to Dr. Rahmon Hart. A few housekeeping items before we get started today. Once you've logged in and are live and watching us now, you do have the opportunity to ask questions. There should be a function at the bottom of your screen. I am moderating questions that do come in throughout the panel. This is intended to be an informal discussion. So if a question comes up for you at a different time or throughout the discussion, by all means, go ahead and ask, and I'll try to incorporate that into our discussion today. And also, on April 23rd, also at 12:30, that is a Wednesday, will be our next Leaders in Liberal Arts Alumni webinar. So if you're so inclined to mark your calendar, it'll be on April 23rd at 12:30 p.m. We're going to be talking about the canonization of Pope John Paul II and related to which will be happening the following weekend for our next webinar. So I'll start with a broad question for the group. Let's talk about race relations from a university perspective. How are we doing? And what are some projects happening across campus, perhaps in the Office of Multicultural Affairs, something you experienced as a student and possibly even as a faculty member? So that'll be our first question.
That's the first one. Okay. You mind if I start?
No, sir.
So I think it just depends on from what angle and what perspective you answer that question. How are we doing? I guess I decided to sort of approach it from being a director of multicultural affairs and having worked at other institutions. And so I'll say that we're doing pretty good. When you think about some of the things that happen on other campuses, acts of intolerance, we don't have a lot of that here at Duquesne. Now it happens. I mean, we're a microcosm of the greater society, so things happen, but not at a significant rate. I think the character of our students is such that it sort of eliminates some of those things from happening, and that's just my perspective, having worked at Slippery Rock and I guess I shouldn't say the names, but Illinois State University, Carnegie Mellon, some of the other places. Our students, even though they're not all Catholic, it seems, well, it's not that it seems, they definitely come with a spiritual foundation that has been different from the other places that I've worked. And that spiritual foundation, whatever it is, it grounds them in such a way that they treat people a little bit differently. And that's just my honest opinion. Now, we have opportunities for growth in other areas, and I guess we can get into that. I'll yield to the others that want to kind of elaborate on that. But I think we're doing really well.
Sure. How about from a student perspective, having just completed your bachelor's degree, now as a graduate student, what has that experience been like for you?
I would say as an undergraduate, especially, just coming in my freshman year in the fall of 2010, it was, there weren't a lot of African Americans. I came from a predominantly African American high school in Newport News, Virginia, so it was definitely a culture shock for me. It was like, oh wow, this is completely different. Never been to Pittsburgh before. But once I got here, and after doing the pre-orientation program with the Office of Multicultural Affairs, I had a nice group of friends. Then I went into the regular orientation, and then I met more people. So it wasn't as bad. It was a nice transition. And since I've been here, it's been more and more and more African Americans especially coming to Duquesne that I've noticed in the past few years. And you see people all over, and it's actually pretty nice. But I mean, there's always issues. Like there's always going to be little things that will be different based upon different cultures. So
Char kind of touched on something too. She kind of touched on the differences with this topic. We're talking about race relations, but she kind of mentioned something that I consider to be diversity, the demographics of our campus population. And I think there's a difference between diversity and inclusion. And the race relations piece really speaks to the inclusive part of this conversation. So the diversity piece basically says, all right, you got this board with a bunch of different colored dots, and 4.2% are African American for undergraduate, 2.7 are Hispanic, 1.85 Asian, 0.13 American Indian, 2.1 two or more races, and then we have 82.8% white students on campus. And so the diversity piece, when you reflect on that, that's an opportunity for us to improve. But when you have all of those dots, the inclusion piece is connecting the dots. Like how do these groups of people interact? And that's what my office does. We try to think of strategic and intentional ways to connect the dots through our programming, through things like the pre-orientation program that she mentioned, in which we try to make students feel comfortable. So we outreach to students of color, but we know what our diversity is like, and we know that there could be some anxiety in making. Char mentioned the culture shock. So we want to introduce them to a support network in which they feel comfortable exploring and going outside of their comfort zones. And the other part of that is we do outreach to white students. So, one of the things that people think is that our office is for students of color only. And I just always say that there's no way that you can improve a campus culture without including the majority of the campus. Like, that's almost ridiculous. So we introduced them to ways to connect. And as Char said, over the last 4 years that she's been here, we've seen more and more students, different students, getting engaged in these culture-specific organizations like the Asian Student Association or the Muslim Student Association, Indian, International, Chinese. We have, probably 14 or 15 different groups. And so that part of it is getting better. And you're starting to see students mainstream into things like student government and outside of their comfort zone. So to me, that's sort of the measuring rod for how students feel. Are they RAs? You see the RA staff, and they've done a tremendous job from when Char started to now. I mean, you look at that staff, there's a ton of different groups of people represented that weren't, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago. Definitely when I started in 2006. So, no, that was a mouthful, but I think that's, that's important to mention, because the way that people feel often is influenced by how inclusive we are in the different organizations and different roles at the university.
Well, from a faculty perspective.
Well, naturally, I'm interested not just in how well people get along, but I'm interested in what people know. And and I appreciate your positive spins on all this, but I am very concerned about how woefully inadequate our general student population is on African American history, women's history. Last month was African American Black History Month. This is Women's History Month, and it almost doesn't matter, the question I ask. And Char, we've been together. Am I right? Am I making this up?
No, she's not.
Yeah. Okay. I can say Tuskegee, and everybody, oh yeah, I know. And then I ask a second question, and it's like, what? So everybody's heard of the Tuskegee syphilis study, but they're not so sure that they know much about it after I push a couple of buttons. And then the Seneca Falls event. What was that about? The what? So I am, as a professor, concerned much more about the not exclusive of is anybody punching anybody else in the eyeballs, but is what is happening in terms of what knowledge are we conveying? Are we conveying only a white male establishment approach to things, or are we talking about people of color and women and all that? So I'm less optimistic, I guess, than you are about the present climate in terms of what people know and what they're challenged to become in terms of educated persons.
Sure. So a follow-up question to that: how do we take steps, not only within the Duquesne community, but maybe in a larger sense, educators? How do we take steps to begin to change that year, 5 years, 10 years from now? If we were to reconvene to say, yeah, I really see the knowledge level of students and the appreciation level and that sort of thing has risen. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that.
Well, you can be sure I do, Jacob. I have big thoughts on that. I have big thoughts on that. Yes, I think it would make very good sense if every faculty member, as part of any orientation or as annual dean talks or something, if faculty members were encouraged, no matter how you look. And today I look particularly interesting because of the cancer cream I'm using. Audience, this is not me every day. This is a special for you event. So what I'm concerned about is that from the administration, faculty are encouraged to do something more than either the dead white male approach or the living white male approach, and not just the stock fare. But expand our book lists, our reading lists, our experiences, our films. Yeah, I have something to say about this.
Yeah. Anyone want to add anything?
And I completely agree with you, because just with coming from like a predominantly African American high school, when I came here, we actually read a lot of African American literature, more than I did in high school. So when I got here and then I started taking my major courses with political science, we read Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, but we never got into like W.E.B. Du Bois. We never got into Booker T. Washington. We don't get into the black philosophers, but we really study and focus on the European philosophers and people from different areas, the Western philosophy. We don't really focus on anybody that's domestic.
And you're not saying, I don't think, that Plato and Socrates aren't important, but they're not the only ones who are important.
Yes.
Got it. And you never mentioned a woman.
Oh, yeah.
I just thought I'd point that out.
One of the things, I don't think we disagree, for sure. I'm taking a layered approach to this topic. So the first layer was how do people treat each other,
Yeah, right.
right?
That's important.
So my feedback is how I think students interact with each other, which I think is pretty good. However, it is very surface level. They're very surface level interactions, and Char's probably heard me say this. And so, but what you're talking about is partly is cultural competence. What do we actually know about each other? And what I challenge students all the time is to get to know, don't just eat lunch and have meaningless conversations with each other all the time. Get to know some of their traditions and know a little bit about that person's history and their background and so on and so forth. And one of the things that we implemented is called the Moral Conversations program. And what that is we set it up. Students have a meal, and over that meal we pick a topic, a hot topic. So it could be gay marriage, it could be the war in Iraq, it could be the death penalty, whatever it is. But we get a diverse group together and we talk about something that we know is going to really, it's going to go down, right? Char's been there. So, but what that does is it allows us to get past these, the surface level interactions and really get to know people. And I think that's where we need to, that's another thing that we need to do. More programs where people take risks, come out to their comfort zones, and really understand different perspectives and worldviews and why people feel the way they do. And I know there's a lot of other things that we can do around curriculum, around training, because there are those incidents where, students will say another student came and touched their hair. That's a big one. That's you'll have a female with maybe braids or something, and someone will touch their hair. And, what is that? That your hair is nice. And just like, black females in particular, you touch their hair, that's like a no-no, especially if they don't know you. So there's some cultural things that I think when you're part of that group that's coming from an environment where there were no African American or Latino, or there was very little racial diversity into this environment. Some students, they're clumsy with their interactions, and some take risks. Others just totally detach, and they don't want to make mistakes, so they don't interact at all. So we have to get students to the place where they're at least to the edge of their comfort zone and want to step out from time to time.
So there have been a number of cases, shift gears just a little bit here, a number of cases, nationally, and obviously the one of recent note, the Trayvon Martin case in Florida. And so I think it would be safe to summarize a great racial divide in terms of how many folks feel about that case. So I guess my question, how do events like that or instances like that sort of help shape how people feel about an issue or sort of our current state within the United States? If anyone wants to take a stab at that one.
I can say, because I was president for Ebony Women for Social Change, and in the spring of 2012, we had a Trayvon Martin rally on campus. And I hosted it and sent out an email campus-wide, and we got a lot of kickback. It was a lot of kickback. They're like, you have to wait to see what the verdict is. There were a lot of profane language that was used. People were not happy about the decision to have a rally on campus.
Are these students, faculty, staff? Who are this?
Most of them were students. Some of them were like, I think there was like one person that was like an assistant in an office that sent an email as well. But the kickback was, why are you doing this? What's the purpose? All these types of things. But it was more or less to talk about how stereotyping has consequences. And how different issues, you don't always have to stereotype. Everybody has their prejudices, but stereotyping it's something that it could have good effects and it could have bad effects. And with that, we held this rally, and it was an interesting turnout. And to see that some people were completely against it, some people were for it, and it wasn't necessarily to sit there and talk about the case, but it's to say that this happens every day. that we have our Jordan Miles, we have our Leon Fords, we have everybody in Pittsburgh. So just to look at it as a one case and this is one thing, no, it happens every day. And that was like the purpose of having it. But people really on campus weren't happy about it. They were looking at it from a very legal standpoint, not really a personal standpoint, and how some of us may feel about it and how it may spark emotions. And maybe not all of us, but a small portion of our population was affected by the fact that somebody was chased, shot, and killed.
Go ahead.
Well, how does it? The question was how. Can you rephrase? Can you restate your question?
Yeah. Well, how do those experiences sort of help shape how people feel, or some of those experiences? So, if I'm a student and I'm reading about this in the news, and then I choose to enroll at the university, and so that has largely shaped my experience. How does that? Maybe I'm not sure if I know where I'm going with this.
Well, I think I have a better understanding. I advise a group called the Collegiate 100. It's primarily a group of African American males who pretty much have dedicated themselves to mentoring inner city youth. And we talked a lot about this. Like, this is a big one. We actually did a follow-up to the program. We had a town hall meeting. Myself and Tracy McCants Lewis, who's faculty member in the law school, we facilitated a town hall meeting with the Collegiate 100 and Black Student Union and a number of other organizations. But I think the way it influences black males in particular when something like that happens is that it opens up wounds that haven't healed yet, and also it really is frustrating and angering. It angers them because that's something that they experience. It's not something that, it happened and all right, let me get over it. It's something that is happening. So when I walk down the street and someone walks across the street when they see me coming, it's like, you feel that. It's because you're being sort of profiled as someone who is violent, or someone that needs to be feared, or when someone clutches their purse when I get on the elevator or moves to the side, and those things are things that black men in particular go through all the time. And so when their peers don't understand that, and there's this kickback that Shar is referring to, it's upsetting because the message sometimes is you don't really care about what I'm experiencing. Sort of like, you're here at Duquesne, you just need to blend in like the rest of us and deal with whatever it is you're going through, and don't say much about it. I mean, that's sometimes the message. And then there's others who are very supportive on the flip side. But that's how it does. Sometimes it could be very frustrating for some students to go through that and to see that play out and hear remarks.
I think in a classroom environment, when we were together in our sociology class last semester, we certainly had some kickbacks. We had very vocal, they happened to be white males, who were very anti-conversation with African American females in particular. But the closed-mindedness that I found particularly in some of our white students was alarming to me, not surprising, but alarming, because I saw a bigotry that would carry over beyond the race issue. It would be prevalent in other issues, and over a semester, you certainly have ample evidence, ample time to collect evidence on how that can be. Is that the majority of our students? I don't think so. But we do have a faction that is going to make life difficult for anyone who is not like them. And in response, some of our students will be bigoted toward them and not make an effort to understand. In this case, some of our young white males. And so that kind of race relations on the surface, we're not killing one another. This is a good thing. However, peel that onion and see where you go. And it's not always easy, but it is life.
Right.
And this is life here.
stay with that thought for a moment. I've noticed this in my own personal life. What you said, I really resonates with me. We're not killing each other. However, there's if you want to use the word closeted racism, bigotry, we won't talk about it in public, but when we close the door, it seems to be okay. Why does that go on? And not that it is okay. How have we gotten to that point? I guess is my question.
The whole notion of the other. We fear the other. And when one person is looking, I think, and seeing another as the other, whether it's female, whether it's male or black or white or whatever, we fear the other, and our fear. There's reasons biblically that, Isaiah or wherever, fear not. That's a common theme in Scripture, because fear will kill us. It will erode our spirit, and it will certainly harm those around us if we allow that to get within us and we lose control of ourselves. So, to me, fear drives a lot of this.
Take a question. This is from Dr. Stoddard, who's kind of joined us here in person as well. We'll focus on campus here. If you were to name one aspect of race relations on Duquesne's campus that you think could improve, what would it be? And a follow-up to that would be, what action would you propose to make improvement in that area?
I would think one thing is, we are this panel. This is a nice panel. Jason, congratulations. But how often is this topic spoken about in the wider context, in the college, in business school? I have no idea. But that's a problem, because I have no idea. How many came to your Trayvon Martin rally?
It was about 50 to 60.
Okay, so that's impressive. But I think we've got to talk to one another, and we can't be afraid of the question or the fallout from the question. That's what I would say.
And my thing is it's transparency. There are a lot of things that we're not proud of when it comes to race relations. But again, when you look at the diversity piece of some of our numbers, like we don't like to talk about some of those shortcomings, because it is. I mean, we have 17 full-time black faculty members at the university. 17 out of almost 500. 9 of them are in a school of education where there's a black dean. That's part of the issue. Like, that is part of the conversation, and it's not pointing fingers. To have that conversation doesn't mean we point fingers at each other, but it's talking about something that really is important and getting it out there and talking about solutions. And I just think that we need to get a little more transparent where we're at and how to improve, and be willing to take risks. That's something that I would like to see. Let's take more risks.
I think in terms of faculty and administration, that makes perfect sense. But in terms of students, the students have to be willing as well, because you can have a more multicultural staff. You can have more programming for multicultural students, or multicultural events, but students have to be willing to participate, because with most of the events, it's always, it never fails, it's the same around 10 people. There's never a mix unless people are getting extra credit or if people are getting some type of incentive to come, but there's always the same people. And I think that's the bigger issue, is that how to get students rallied around to come to these events, or to come and make complaints, or to do different things like this, because there's always the same 10 people.
So my follow-up to that would be, are we, meaning the university, just a small snapshot of a bigger issue, meaning the city of Pittsburgh, southwestern Pennsylvania? heard a statistic recently that the Pittsburgh area is one of the least diverse. In diversity, what I mean by racial breakdown or ethnicity, within the area. So are we just a snapshot, a small snapshot of a bigger issue in the community, in the city of Pittsburgh, around southwestern PA?
Yes. Yes. 82%, 4%.
We are. And Ralph Bangs had a study. Did you hear? Ralph Bangs from the University of Pittsburgh had a study in which he found that actually Pittsburgh is one of the worst places to live for African Americans. And if you looked at the other minority groups, I'm sure you would find similar findings or make similar conclusions. But it's a very segregated community. I grew up in Pittsburgh. I'm proud I love Pittsburgh, so I'm a proud Pittsburgh native. But we definitely have challenges in Pittsburgh. We're very segregated. People don't tend to cross the bridges, and so when you think about if we have students coming from these schools, Mount Lebanon or other schools that are in the suburbs that are 99.9% white, when you get them here to campus, again, their cultural competency and they're not willing to take as many risks as a student who was in a more diverse schools. And so we do have to, I think part of what we could do is outreach more to some of those schools and challenge them to educate their students and make their curriculum, more culturally relevant and really challenge them across cultures as well. So when they get into the real world, that they have some tools that they can utilize to interact with people more effectively. But I do think we're a result of we're influenced by Pittsburgh, which isn't that diverse. Some of the challenges as well.
You're both involved in the community. So are there conversations being had in terms of how to challenge folks or raise their awareness level, or just an open dialogue to sort of change that from your experiences, whether it be in a church or in a parish, other community organizations, maybe some things you're doing from a student perspective?
I think there's a lot being done around the city. One of the things one of the groups that's making heroic efforts is the Pennsylvania Interfaith Impact Network, PIN, and they work on gun control and transportation issues and education and all kinds of things, and they hold rallies. But I don't see a whole lot of Duquesne folks there, and the PIN. Let me just say that one more time: Pennsylvania Interfaith Impact Network. Duquesne is sometimes there. The NAACP makes efforts. The Urban League makes efforts. There are many groups that make efforts, and I think we could be doing a little better supporting them as a university.
Sure.
And then, all of those, Pittsburgh is small too, so the ones she named, like the Urban League and NAACP, those are the usuals. Even I would say Pittsburgh Public Schools, Pittsburgh Promise Initiative has components. We Promise, In Need, and One Hood is another one, grassroots organization. And they're really trying to change the mental models that people have about people of color. That's a big one, because if you don't have a lot of exposure, and you're told, or you turn on the news and you see black male arrested for this, black male arrested for that. You need to see a black male who's in a professional role and who's being a mentor, being a positive and productive citizen too. Those things are important. And I know they're trying to do those things, but there are a number of organizations, grassroots, who are doing a lot in the city to try to change things and address the issues that we have, like around police brutality and things of that nature. We have a lot of issues oriented, or issues focused groups in Pittsburgh.
So if you're viewing us at home or your office, if you'd like to submit a question, we will leave some time toward the end for audience questions. At the bottom of your screen, there should be an option for you to submit a question, and I'll see it pop up on my screen here. We'll work that into our conversation. So let's turn nationally here for a sec. We are in the second term of an African-American president. I remember hearing as a child, that would sort of be a huge moment in the history of the country, and it was, right? Same thing would happen if a female were elected president. So with that moment in mind, race relations across the country, do you think we've made progress, knowing that we're in the second term of an African-American president?
Yeah. Go, Rahmon. You go, because I might be here the rest of today.
Well, I really don't think so. I mean, I don't think. I think it's quite an accomplishment. You have to acknowledge the fact that we've made significant strides to get to a place where people would elect an African American president.
And re-elect.
And re-elect. You have to acknowledge that. So we've made significant strides. However, there's no post-racial this or that, or there's no racism is still here. And in fact, it actually, one of the things that I've noticed, I'm just sharing my opinion, is that it's actually given some people, it makes them feel comfortable saying racist remarks, and to let some of that out, because they'll just say, well, we're there now, so now I can speak my mind. And I'm seeing that a lot, where they're like, whoa, where did this come from? So I think that since we gave you the president, now I can let you know really what's on my mind. And I'm seeing some incredible things said about President Obama. That it blew me away, like just some of the things that you see that's directed his way. The mannequin that was hung, I don't know if he's at the gas station, and a lot of things, toward a president that I've never seen before.
You lie. Right up the road.
So I don't think that it's eliminated anything.
Well, no, not only that, but look at all the voter suppression laws that are coming in, state after state after state after state. We already know that young black males, 18 to 24, are incarcerated in rates greater than any other segment of the population. And once they emerge, too often they are disenfranchised. They are not able to vote. We have been trying to take away the vote of somebody, anybody, everybody, who will vote for another Barack Obama. We see this in state after state after state. And it's including Pennsylvania. It's terrifying. I think. It's not giving us, we're all holding hands singing kumbaya stuff. No, the work is we must continue to work for inclusion. Otherwise, we will continue to step back into more significant exclusion, I think.
Rahmon, to your point, it kind of joggled something for me when President Obama was elected. I remember hearing media reports that I don't know if they quite went as far as saying racism is dead, but so although a historic and large moment, I think we'd all agree. However, what you said, it allows sort of these secondary conversations to happen, and people get things out in the open. I've seen it even family members of mine. So I wonder what would happen if a female, politics aside, say a female were elected president. What type of response?
Politics aside? Jason, I gotta fasten my seatbelt.
We're in the fast lane.
Yes, sir.
But I mean, so we're speculating, of course. But what do you think the response would be?
How does her hair look? Why is she wearing that dress? Isn't that kind of cut low? Whoever talks about a man suit? Come on. Yeah, and we've seen that so much already.
Let her cry. That'll be a complete issue.
Yeah.
John Boehner cries all the time.
Yeah, not a problem.
Not a problem.
Or mood changes, or getting upset. So I think it would be the same. Yeah, I think there would be some similar responses, like some very sexist remarks being made, and I do think that would happen. People would feel more comfortable, in letting those things out, jokes and a number of things, unfortunately. But again, I mean, you can't take away the fact that would be a great thing. It would be an accomplishment, but we haven't arrived when it happens. So I still would like to see a female president, even though it's not going to eliminate all the world's problems, but I still would like to see it. I'd like for my daughter to be able to see it, because I do think that it makes a significant impact on kids. I have a 4-year-old and I have a 7-year-old. All they know is a black president. Like, that's all they know. We're supposed to have black presidents. That's just how it is. So it's going to be a shock to them when a new president comes in. So,
not to get overly political, and we'll go on to something else here shortly. But it's an interesting juxtaposition. So there are states out there that have legalized or went ahead with things like gay marriage or marijuana, things like that. So most people would interpret that, at least in my thinking, it's a very progressive, sort of forward-thinking type of ideology. Whereas, yet when it comes to an African-American president, female president, that sort of thing, it's a. So on one hand, you have a lot of progress, but on the other hand, you have some really old, tried and true, hateful things going on. It's an interesting, dynamic. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that.
I'm thinking, sure. Well, for one thing, to me, the marijuana, for God's sake. I mean, come on, that's a singular pleasure that a person may choose to have. But the public face of the country being black or female, we have not come to this, have we? I think we're talking very different kinds of concepts. The what's good for the individual. The gay marriage, though, I think that's pretty. That's a pretty dicey one. Marijuana compared to the election of the president, no, I think we're talking worlds apart.
So we're almost drawing to a close in terms of our time. Where do we go from here? Knowing what we know, knowing that the past has been what it's been, where we are in current times, where do we go from here, not only in the university, the city, and as a country?
In terms of the university, I definitely would like to see more inclusion, even with multicultural programs, like the international students mixing more with maybe the Black Student Union or the Ebony Women for Social Change, just different things like that, just to promote the cultural competence that, even though you may be black, you could still be culturally competent about other groups as well. Or even though you're Asian or whatever you are, you can still be culturally competent. But I would love to see on a university level just there more of a mixing of people and not the same, because it's always the same 10. Just more of a mixing of people. I'm not exactly sure how that can happen, but I would love to see it.
I would like to see us move as a university, I'll just stay there, toward the peaceable community of justice and love that Jesus the Christ talks about. Now, I know everybody's not Christian, that's fine. But he, for one, had many important things to say about that direction and moving against the kingdom of Satan or the evil one, where we're talking about greed and the self-serving power and the kinds of we need to be more about the subversion of evil, and we need to do that in more significant ways. We need to look at our investments. We need to look at who we support and how we support them as a university. I think that would be a start. and do that in the name of God.
And I just, it has to be a part of the institution's fabric. Like I think one of the things that I would like to see is more of a commitment, human resources and financial resources, to address diversity and inclusion in a more strategic and intentional way on a daily basis, not in an ad hoc sort of a way. That's sort of the universities across the nation approach inclusion sometimes in an ad hoc way. What I mean by, we'll develop a committee, and that committee, in addition to all their other, you're going to be associate dean, you're going to teach classes, and you're going to have this other thing on your plate, on this committee. I think we need a person whose job is every day to be looking at ways that we can improve and across the board. Part of the president's cabinet. And I think that would send a message, and it'll also, we would have someone who's looking at what we do in the community, what we do as it relates to interacting with students like I do, faculty and staff and HR, how we're securing vendors and procurement. I mean, all these things matter, and I think to connect the dots, that's a way you change the culture. You can't always just address one without the other. So I would like to see us do something like that.
Okay. We do have some time for some questions. A question that came in, so this is from Jackie. Hostility against social programs, or quote-unquote quotas, or corporate efforts to ensure inclusion of all minorities are now considered unfair by courts in the majority. Yet efforts to diversify labor forces in colleges don't face the same negative stigma. Is that because of more open communication in this generation, or is it because the term diversify is more acceptable?
Good, see that. I don't think I even understand it.
I heard the word quota.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah, I wanted to
Be
get
my
that.
guest.
Quotas. Well, I mean, I'll address the quota part. I don't think, well, universities we don't do quotas. I mean, that's something that we don't do, and that's not even part of the conversation. I think really what it is, again, being intentional about outreaching and making sure that different types of people are included at the table. And we're doing our hiring and we're doing our recruiting. We got to make sure we're going everywhere, and we're addressing our weaknesses as well. So, and it is criticized. It's not broadly embraced by everyone when you put something on the table to diversify a particular unit. It's not always embraced. So I don't know if we widely embrace diversity initiatives all the time, but we definitely don't do quotas.
Anyone else like to comment?
Yeah, I think people are afraid that if women and people of color get stuff, then other folks will lose. And so we put it in a zero-sum game, and that's an unfortunate way to view anything. And so if we are able to see that in his words, her words, to diversify means everybody wins. It's not who wins and who loses. But if we're inclusive, that's the justice that we talk about. And if we don't work for justice, we're going to be in bad shape. When we are in bad shape because we haven't worked for justice. If we don't recognize white privilege, male privilege, if we don't recognize what kinds of addictions we foster in our society, whether it's with food or whether it's alcohol and drugs, if we're not looking at reality, if we're looking at a construct that we wish were true, we're going to have some problems, and I think we have. How are we addressing the concept of women earning 77 cents on the dollar, to every male dollar? I mean, does that matter to anybody? I hope so. I think we've got to me, we've got to focus on some very real questions as a university, as a community, as a nation.
I think that's a good place to end things. My thanks to Dr. Rahmon Hart, Dr. Moni McIntyre, Ms. Charquinta McCray. Certainly a challenging and uneasy topic at times. My name is Jason Broadwater, and I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. You can catch us again on April 23rd at 12:30 p.m. For a conversation about the canonization of Pope John Paul II and sort of subsequent related material at that time. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion, and we will see you then. Thanks so much.